Well, good morning, everyone. I think. Where are you? There's nobody here. Something is not right here, Dan. Oh, there you are. Way out there. Well, again, good morning. Nice to see all of you. And welcome to this first virtual lunch talks from the Tempe Historical Society. This is the first time in all the years that we've been doing these lunch talks that we don't have you here in person. And we're looking forward to the day when you'll be back and things will be much more normal than previous circumstances. I know that you were probably expecting Vic Linoff to do the introductions because that's what he usually does, and that rises about as high to his level of incompetence. My name is Jay Mark. I'm his better-looking, more articulate, handsome, older brother. And so because Vic is back at home, hiding, protecting himself from the outside world, he asked me, since I'm doing the presentation, to go ahead and do all of the introductions. So here we are, and we can go ahead with that if you want to transition. The last you'll see of my handsome face for a while. So I want to introduce you to Mark Young. You have met him before. He represents Friendship Village, and Friendship Village has been such a gracious sponsor for at least 4 or 5 years of our lunch talks. And all of the great pastries and coffee that you've enjoyed and our speakers are all thanks to the support and encouragement from Friendship Village. So I'm going to let Mark give a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Mark Young, and I'm the Director of Sales Marketing here at Friendship Village in Tempe, Arizona. Friendship Village Tempe is a nonprofit entity which began in 1980 and provides quality residential housing for seniors, along with a wide array of services and amenities. Friendship Village is managed by Life Care Services, which started in 1971 and currently manages 133 communities in 32 states. Life Care Services manages 33,600 beds and employs more than 23,400 staff. Friendship Village is designed to offer an environment that enriches your life. The village's objective is to offer a lifestyle with services and programs based on your interests that will complement or augment your current lifestyle and well-being. The village's design allows for creativity and healthy lifestyle activities in a comfortable environment. As a life care community, the village offers residents a wide array of amenities and services, including the availability of on-site assisted living, memory care, healthcare center, a nurse practitioner clinic, and long-term care if needed. To learn more about Friendship Village, please visit us at friendshipvillageaz.com or call 480-831-5000. Friendship Village is proud to be a sponsor of the Tempe Historical Society and look forward to today's lunch talk. Thank you.
And thank you, Mark, and of course our great appreciation to Friendship Village for continuing to support us, and particularly during this year of not knowing what's going to happen, and while we try out our new virtual presentation format. Today's presentation really centers around the fact that come January, and we don't have exact dates, but 2021 will be our SESQUICENTENNIAL, and we expect you to be able to pronounce that over the course of the next 12 months. SESQUICENTENNIAL, the 150th birthday of the city of Tempe. And so we thought a good way to start, and we'll have some terrific speakers coming in the following months, but to give a little bit of history of our community, how we kind of got ourselves going, what we were able to accomplish, and a few things that we've lost along the way. And before I start, I just came across an article that I found very interesting. It concerns ASU and its aggressive growth plans. It says, more industry doubtless will be lured to the city when Arizona State fully develops its new engineering program. The Engineering and Technology Center, where its courses will be given, is but the largest of a number of big building projects currently on the campus. Quite interesting, especially since it was written March 17th, 1957. So that's how long we've been working towards building this city into the great metropolis that it is today. Tempe has always been a welcoming community. Even back in the days of Wallace and Ladmo, they were happy to stand on the old ash bridge, welcoming cars that were never coming because the bridge had been closed since 1924. So it might be useful to look at Tempe and see how it's evolved over the years. And it can be divided into different phases. The earliest phases, the first 2 decades, were really settlement times. Charles Trumbull Hayden came through on a number of occasions while freighting from Tucson to Prescott, because the crossing of the Salt River was in the vicinity of Tempe. And then after 1869, he encountered a great flood and had to spend time on the south side of the river before he could cross. So he got a chance to climb the butte, look at the potential, and made the decision to make Tempe his new home, which he began doing in 1871. So that's the settlement phase. And between then, 1890, and World War II, the community was evolving and developing into a real town rather than just a settlement. After the war, because many people trained in the valley, Tempe, along with the rest of the Salt River Valley, experienced explosive growth. And that continued well into the 1960s. And then 60s and 70s, like much of America's business centers, they're downtowns. And when I talk about decline, I'm referring to our real city center. This was the time when growth began to move away from the aggregation of the town center. And it was a time when suburban strip malls were beginning to be developed. Tempe Center in 1957, for example. And then between 1975 and through the 90s, there was a rebirth. More people moving in, more businesses opening up, and the city really was coming back to life. But in the 21st century, we've seen a remarkable transformation in what was really a small agrarian college town into a city of dynamic growth and size. And today, because we can't increase our land area, we are in a period of urbanization, increased density, because with no more land to build on, all we can do is go up. And land area, Tempe started out really with Charles Trumbull Hayden's property and where he put his mill. But by 1894, we were just a little less than 2 square miles. And believe it or not, that lasted for 46 years and didn't expand much by 1950, about 0.8 of a mile. And this is what a map of Tempe looked like in 1950. And if you take a look at the borders, you can see here, these are the town limits or the city limits of Tempe back in 1950. So we were compact. We were just beginning to start that period of growth. In 1960, the growth was enormous. We were 17.5 square miles, and you can see the progression through today, where at build-out we are 40.6 square miles. We are one of the smallest cities in area in the state. And population reflects how the city grew otherwise. By 1890, there were just 135 people here. When we incorporated, we had moved up in just 4 years to almost 900. And the progression was steady through the 1940s. But after the war, you can begin to see where Tempe really began to experience an influx of population. 1910, we were the 16th largest city. 1950, we were the 7th largest city, believe it or not, in Arizona. And in that decade between 50 and 60, population exploded. And it continued to do that decade by decade, and is really still doing it today. In 2000, at 150, almost 159,000, we were the 5th largest city, and it's estimated that we will be at about 194, maybe 200,000 when this census is concluded, and that would make us the 8th largest city in Arizona. So, how Tempe got its name, it's attributed to Darrell Dupa. Some say that Charles Trumbull Hayden created the name, but Dupa was an errant Englishman who wound up, for a variety of reasons, here in Tempe. Some of it, apparently, he wasn't in good standing with his family and kind of had to go somewhere else. But he had classical training, as many British folks do. And at looking at the topography of our community, he concluded that it resembled the Valley of Tempe in Greece. How does that really work? Well, this is the closest that we can get to that resemblance. And if you look at that little area included in the circle, it makes a lot of sense why Dupa felt that Tempe would be an appropriate name for this community. There it is. It's the area between the buttes, now taken up by Sun Devil Stadium. So this is the famous Dyer map. Sir J. Dyer, who was a draftsman, an engineer, and an incredible creator of bird's eye view maps, created this in 1885, just at the time when the college was ready to be settled. But in that red circle, you see that there is the flour mill that was really the impetus for the growth of this community for its first many years. Another important aspect of growth was the railroad and its ability to cross the Salt River. It came to Tempe in 1887 and ended there for a couple of months until the line was completed into Phoenix. Then, not a lot of people are aware, but this city was a shipping center for livestock, cattle and sheep, and we actually had a yard in which those animals could be brought to before they were shipped out to various areas of the country. There's a little bit of closer view of that valley that so entranced Dupa. And what's really important, too, is that Tempe was not just one community. It initially did not have the greatest relations with the Mexican folks who were here before Anglos got in. And so they were actually given a piece of land if they would build a church, which you can see in the right at the base of the butte, for their own community, which was popularly known as San Pablo. It's hard to imagine what this early town looked like. The first buildings tended to be adobe. That's what Charles Trumbull Hayden built, or wood framed. And that, of course, caused a number of early fires. When brick became more available, as in Harry Bernard's Fair Store, then more buildings started to be constructed of brick. But these are some of the earliest buildings that Dyer portrayed on his bird's eye view map of Tempe. One of the great things that we have in this community is a landmark that has provided us the opportunity to actually see how this town has grown over the years, and that's the Butte. Aside from things that were put up on the Butte and taken down, it essentially has not changed. So we can go up and stand in this very same position and see the change that has taken place since then. Tempe also became a community of bridges, the first being the railroad bridge across the river, and there was also another one that I'll show you in a bit on the east side of what's now the Mill Avenue Bridge. Also, we were the second crossing of the Salt River, particularly the first in the East Valley when the Ash Bridge opened in 1914, and that's the arch bridge that's in the middle. So from the Butte, one can see that there is a tremendous amount of change, especially along the river. Not much happened in the early years because of the flooding that took place. And so from the mill, where you see the silos, you can now see how much growth has taken place along the river. And as the city built out, that was really the only land that was available. And with the construction of Roosevelt Dam that began in 1903, the river essentially was tamed, and so it becomes much safer to build right along the river, which years ago would have flooded. As I say, the Hayden Flour Mill, which is that number 3 on the map, is what got this whole community going. And you can see not only the mill, but here is the Charles Trumbull Hayden's home. And where Beach Park is today, he had planted groves and was able to provide food that could be sold in a store that he also opened. He was a multi-purpose businessman. This is much later in the 1930s, and you can see the mill, which was constructed after a disastrous fire at the mill, the original mill building. A new one was built in 1918, and the silos were built in 1951. The Hayden House is this building back here, and he also had a warehouse behind. That has been demolished. And the Hayden House, too, is going through a major renovation and going back to its original appearance. When it was first built, it was just a strip along Mill Avenue, and as success came along, he built to the west, and for a while there was even a second floor. This is Mill Avenue, and this was not the thoroughfare of the city, although it was the center of the business district. Ash Avenue was this road that would then take people across the river into the north side of the valley. And this was a thriving industry up until about 1991, and when it finally closed, it was the longest running industrial business in the state of Arizona. And frankly, not a lot has changed over the years. The other thing that really helped Tempe grow and get on the map was the railroad, which I indicated came in 1887. There was a lot of debate and a lot of controversy about where that rail line should be situated. And through a lot of lobbying, Hayden had a lot to do with it, and other folks. Finally, the legislature approved an alignment that came from Maricopa Junction into Tempe with plans to cross the river. Not a lot of people are aware of where that first depot was, which was 5th Street and Ash. It's number 5 on that arrow, and I can give you a little closer view. These views are all from the chromolithograph bird's eye view that Dyer created. And I believe we've only got one photograph, and it's pretty grainy, that shows that original mill, or the original depot, and a very early train. Maricopa and Phoenix Railroad is what it says on the coal car behind it. That didn't last too long, and the railroad then the depot moved over to its current location at 3rd Street and Ash. Actually, there have been probably, I want to say, 5 depots, a couple on the Ash site, one on 3rd Street, west of Mill Avenue, and 2 on the east side of Mill, near the Butte, because eventually there were two railway lines. And this is how the depot looked in the 70s, kind of tired, because the only thing that it was doing was seeing trains go by into Phoenix. Amtrak had stopped service, so there really wasn't much need for the depot. Oh, I should point out at the top of the image you see the Tempe sign, which is really a wonderful graphic. It's glass that has a depth and dimension to it. And we have that in the collection, and Dan Miller has restored it, and I think it's on display now. But it's a great thing to look for at the museum. Today, the mill has been cleaned up because a restaurant went in there. There's going to be some other changes coming very soon that you'll hear about. In this view, you see the bridge to the west. The original railroad bridge was slightly to the west of that. Didn't last for very long, and a new bridge was put in its place, and it was finally replaced in 1912 by the bridge that's there today. And even with the major fire that took place, the bridge still stands, and that's a credit to how it was built. Then there's the Phoenix and Eastern Railroad Bridge, which is the one at the lower portion of the photograph, and that runs right behind the mill, so flour and grain could be loaded right there onto trains, and then those trains eventually, about 1892, reached the burgeoning community of Mesa. So this is a map that shows that the river, and it's one of the few that actually indicates the alignment of the Phoenix and Eastern Railway. It crosses into Moore Park, and if you walk along the river, you can actually still see a cut in the hillside where the railroad makes its turn to the west. And so we've got the railroad alignments, the southern, now it's Southern Pacific, as it was in 1926. And you can see how it then was moving to the south. Our first crossing, as I indicated, was the Ash Bridge. It took a while to get that going, but it also became an important conduit for transportation from the north side to the south side of the river. In 1911, the Roosevelt Dam was completed and dedicated, and there was a lot of debate about getting a bridge to cross the river. And so in 1911, the Tempe Bridge was given permission to be built, And the unusual thing about it is that Governor Hunt, who was quite a colorful individual, decided that he would do a couple of things that would help save money and might be important to social reform. He declared that he would use prison convict labor from Florence to build the bridge. Naturally, the residents of Tempe weren't too pleased with that idea because 57 to 70 men, prisoners, would be working there every day. Excuse me. So Hunt, to appease any fears that people might have, declared that should any prisoner escape, he would immediately resign from office. And he was sort of correct. Not one prisoner escaped. 15 fled, and most were ultimately caught. And Hunt made an excuse and, of course, never resigned from office. In fact, when he was defeated in an election, he still did not want to give up his office. And that's kind of, well, never mind. I don't want to talk about politics in today. The bridge was built at a cost of about $118,000. But it was poorly planned. It was in the transition between horse-drawn vehicles and automobiles and trucks. But it was constructed as a wagon bridge, only 18 feet wide, no sidewalks. And very shortly, horse-drawn vehicles were disappearing and cars and trucks were coming along. And they caused a lot of problems for that bridge. Well, let me show you Pier 9. This is important. Naturally, you've got to go down to bedrock when you build these things. And this pier never reached bedrock and then would give years of problems and frustrations for the Arizona Transportation Department, because this bridge, particularly pier during flood events, would tend to sink, and that would cause damage to the bridge and ultimately lead to its demise. It was closed a number of times because of damage from flooding, which was still occurring around the time that it was built. So by 1924, it was just deemed to be unsafe, and it was closed permanently. And so we were without a bridge for about 7 years until a new one could be constructed. This was an open spandrel arch bridge, extremely beautiful. All that remains today is a section of the bridge. We had hoped when Town Lake was being proposed that this bridge could be retained as a pedestrian walkway across. And actually it was in much better shape than people imagined. Structurally, all the other, aside from Pier 9, were all sound. The roadbed and the railing were deteriorating, but that's the least expensive parts of a bridge to replace. So the decision was made to tear it down, and that began in 1991, and it turned out to be much stronger than it ever was portrayed. Engineers were surprised. The reason it looks bad here is because the demolition crew brought in a device from California, which is the largest in the country, and it's a big jackhammer affair. It looks almost like an elephant's tusk, I don't mean that. But it was able to, well, my analysis or analogy is that if I hit you in the knee with a sledgehammer, you're probably going to fall. And so it was taken down masterfully and is no more. But it was replaced by the Mill Avenue Bridge, which was actually completed in 1930, but was not dedicated until 1931. And it, too, is an open spandrel arch, built much better than the Ash Bridge, which is a testament to how long it's lasted. We had the big floods in the 80s when there was only one crossing in the East Valley to the north side. This was the bridge that people used. And in itself, it is quite beautiful. Tempe, if it had retained all of its bridges, would have something like 6-7 bridges. And so even today, it's still the town of bridges. Nowhere else do you have that many bridges crossing in one community. Well, eventually it was decided that there was too much traffic. This is right around the time that the freeway was built. There was too much traffic being used on the bridge, so we needed a new Mill Avenue bridge. And work began on that bridge in February of 1992. Remember, the Ash Bridge was about $118,000. This bridge was $8.8 million to build. And it was also the time that the freeway, which you can see in the background, was already in operation. So much of the traffic that had used the Mill Avenue Bridge before the freeway had diverted to the easier roadway to get to and from the East Valley. And almost a year after construction started, a flood event took place. And remember, when the Salt River floods today, it's not a natural flood. It's because Roosevelt Lake is at capacity, and Salt River Project has to release water down the river. And there was anticipation that this might happen. So scaffolding, which you can kind of see in the picture, was constructed to withstand about 80,000 cubic feet per second of water flow. Well, unfortunately, the flow increased to 124,000 CFS at 10:15 at night, and this was the result. And people were saying the bridge collapsed, which really isn't true. Only the scaffolding collapsed. Anything that was already constructed came out just fine, but that amount of flow, the scaffolding just could not hold up. And so the bridge was dedicated in 1994, and now we have that additional crossing. And then there's something else that, we're always so arrogant or prideful. We've got a town lake, and we're the only one with that. Well, we're not the first. And the first town lake was in Tempe. I don't know how many of you might remember that, but it was a more modest lake. It was only covering about 10 acres with a depth to 4 feet. They had hoped to expand it to 24 feet. Or rather 23 acres. And it saw a lot of activities, motorboat racing and water skiing. And Marianne Hagestad, in this photograph, was crowned queen of a festival that took place. I had a chance to talk to her, and although it seemed like it was an election and she got this recognition, she was actually hired to be the queen of the festival. Its name, if you have forgotten or never knew it, was Lakeside Amusement Park. It opened in 1949, and it had problems from the very start. This was a privately operated lake, and the riverbed was quite porous, and that meant that the water that kept flowing in, and that was, most of the water was being stolen from Beach Park, which didn't do those folks much good, and they weren't very happy about it. But the water kept seeping out. It never had a good liner to it. So it only operated for about a year, but long before Tempe Town Lake was even in anyone's imagination, we had Lakeside Amusement Park. There's an ad, and it explains just how to get there. The north end of the Tempe Bridge at the Rancho Drive-In. That's about where it was located in today's town lake. And of course, Beach Park provided a lot of amenities to people in the desert. There was a swimming hole near the saddle of the butte. Water always seemed to be there, and for many years that's where people would go to swim, and folks would come from all over the valley in order to avail themselves of the water that was there. But eventually, in 1924, the city purchased 27 acres on the south side of the river and built what is now Beach Park. The Rock Stadium that baseball was played at was built in 34. And the big Olympic-sized swimming pool was constructed in 1936 as part of a WPA project. And there it is. And again, everyone from around the valley, although there were a lot of pools, still came to Tempe to avail themselves of the giant pool that existed. Eventually, the rock bathhouse and amenities were torn down, and the pool became literally worn out. It had to be drained each week, and that caused problems. So it was all shut down. And so in the before it was shut completely, a new bathhouse and concession building was constructed in the 1960s. And it was very mid-century modern in contrast to the rubble rock house of the 1930s. But when the pool finally closed, then it became the home of the Tempe Arts Center, the first Tempe Arts Center. And you can see in the background, this photograph is from 1998, the beginning of the construction of the American West headquarters. There was an unusual feature that was at the top of the old concessions building. This is an anamorphic image that was created to be viewed the way you're seeing it in only one spot. And she had a name. I don't know if you recall her name, but I will be generous enough to tell you, Zona Mona. And a local Tempe artist, Jim Eder, designed and painted it. And so you could identify where that sweet spot was to view it. A plaque was put on the Mill Avenue Bridge in 1994 when it was completed. Well, the bathhouse, the concession building is gone. Zona Mona has disappeared, but the plaque is still there. So you can climb up about 200 feet, 300 feet on the Mill Avenue Bridge, find that plaque, and imagine that you're looking at Zona Mona. Tempe, in its very early years, you see a contrast of buildings. Some were brick, some were wood frame and adobe. This is before 1894. The road between the buildings here is Mill Avenue, but there was a lot of room for growth, as you can well see. This was not a well-defined community architecturally at that time. This is how it looked by the 1930s. Obviously, a lot more infill, but still room for growth. And Mill Avenue really began filling out. By the 50s, it was pretty much filled out along Mill Avenue. And then later we would start to get new development that would remove some of those buildings. The Mission Palms Hotel took out a number of buildings. What happened when facilities like that were constructed, the scale was dramatically changed because the early buildings were in the range of 25, 50, 75, maybe 100 feet of frontage. And of course, we have the towers at Center Point, which still remain the tallest at 30 stories. Looking at the downtown, up in the background, you can see the hardware building and Laird and Dines. This is from the 1930s when the arcade was put on it. But still, some of the early buildings are retained. And this is about the same view of the previous slide of what it looks like today. 1954, Tempe, virtually as I showed you in its size, ended at what's now Apache Boulevard, 13th Street. Everything to the south of that essentially was farmland. And it's hard to imagine today that recently we were such a compact community. And this is the same view today, and in 1960. So in just a short period of time, development began to expand outside of the original town center, and that's how we got to the 2.8 square miles early on. This is how it looked in 2000, and even today there are more additions. Mill Avenue was a dirt road. 1910, you've got a variety of buildings. The one with the cupola to the left was Laird and Dines. This is Mill Avenue, now paved, of course, in just after World War II, but still retaining many of its early buildings. They were quite serviceable. And it was only when cities wanted to show themselves as progressive, they began to tear down those early buildings. And many of them today have been torn down since because they just weren't as well built. So you've got various views of Mill Avenue still thriving in the 1950s because this was the business center of the community until Tempe Center was built right on the edge at 8th Street and Mill, which is University and Mill, and of course that's gone today. Another thing that was very important to Tempe's history, and you can see it to the left there, is the sign that designates that 4 highways go through along Mill Avenue, coming from Mesa to move on into Phoenix and to the west, 60, 70, 80, 89, and Arizona 93. That's rather remarkable that you have this convergence of all of these highways. And that really helped the business district grow and attracted people to Tempe. The downside was because it was a federal highway, there was a time when the street had to be widened, so some of the facades of the buildings were changed because of that. Looking to the north, you can see a landmark sign where that arrow is, and if you've been around long enough, you would remember Dana Brothers Motor Company. We bought a vehicle from them, and it was a landmark automotive business in the downtown. There is what's on the site today. Eventually, that will get filled in. Tempe Hardware Building, prominent. Tempe Daily News to its right is, you can see that in this photograph from 1954. This is part of the Goodwin building, which was built by Garfield Goodwin, who had several brothers, but Garfield owned a Wells Fargo agency and built his Indian store and constructed this building back in 1907. In 1990, a renovation was done to the building, and it had been stuccoed over. And when that was removed, this is what showed up, and there was an attempt to try to save it, but as soon as the sun hit it, it just really faded it, and the paint started to peel, and we weren't able to see that saved. So Tempe got its pavement in 1919, its first paved street, and then the street was completely redone in 1987. Interestingly, the city had been talking about renovating Mill Avenue and making it more pedestrian friendly, and it suddenly had a great incentive to do that in a short amount of time because it was announced that the Pope would be coming to Arizona and conduct a mass at Sun Devil Stadium. So the street was entirely torn up. New utilities were put in. The street realigned with medians, and all of this was done in 6 months, just in time for the Pope to come down Mill Avenue. People were discouraged from attending, and generally tens of thousands of people come out to see the Pope. And there were so many scare tactics, and I happened to be downtown at the time, that the greatest number of people were the police lining the street. Nobody showed up because they were so discouraged about coming out. But Sun Devil Stadium was packed when the Pope conducted a mass there. Some other important early businesses, the Hilgus Bakery. This was the first spec building constructed in Tempe. There you see it about 1889, and Hilgus was the first occupant of that building. And of course it became known as the Tempe Bakery, and finally the Hackett House. What you can see here is a separate building that's long gone. This is the back side of the Hackett House with the balcony, and fortunately that building has been restored. There's some interesting stories. Hilga was a German immigrant who built the bakery and got it to sufficient size that he was selling his baked goods to other communities, Chandler, Mesa, and some was shipped to Phoenix. And then he had some other issues and finally committed suicide in 1905. And they say that it might have been the result of depression from injuries after a 30-foot fall from the top of the butte a few weeks earlier. Others believe it was the result of competition generated by Charles Bauer, who worked for Hilga before opening his own bakery, the Vienna Bakery, in 1904. And this property then was purchased by Edward and Mary Craig in 1908, and they converted it to a residence. Their daughter Estelle lived there, and she's best remembered as being Tempe's first telephone operator, although it wasn't in that building. And she lived in the house until 1974, when it was acquired by the city. It was put on the National Register of Historic Places and was restored and is now home to sister cities. So this building, I don't know if this looks familiar, it was called the Tempe Hotel and was a grand place for lodging for travelers, and this is about 1889. It was a wood frame building, so it didn't last long, and it burned a few years later and was replaced by a brick building that you see here. And that went through some changes, and now you probably recognize it as the Casa Loma Hotel. The renovation of it enclosed the sleeping porches, and there were some very famous businesses there, and the building still stands today, but it is when the roadway was widened because of the federal highways, its east facade had to be altered, and that's what it looked like, and many remember that before the ultimate renovation took place. And there's how it looks today. It also was the center for a film called Mark Men, which we have shown a couple of times, and I think we're going to revive our film festival for the SESQUICENTENNIAL. And this is where the Tempe Bank, so-called Tempe Bank, was located, although there was one actually right across the street. Why they didn't use that, I really don't know. But they created a bank in the corner of the Casa Loma building. And so I don't know if this building looks familiar or if this helps. It's pretty well covered up there in the background when it was the Kenmore Apartments. But it's across the street from the Casa Loma Hotel. And it's experienced a number of businesses, and this is part of a big renovation, that took place in the 1980s. The Andre Building, another landmark. It was built by R.G. Andre, who had a business in Phoenix, but also, as some people did, opened satellites in other communities. And he built a wood frame building in 1888, and in 1899 it was destroyed by fire, and this was the new building that he constructed, 9,000 square feet, has some neoclassical elements, and Andre himself was a saddle maker, but there were many other businesses that were in this building, including the Pioneer Meat Market, the Sunset Telegraph Telephone Company, Wells Fargo, Wycliffe's Furniture and Undertakers, and the Tempe Post Office, and a slew of fraternal lodges. Ancient Order of Workmen, United Workmen, Degree of Honor, Alden Lodge, Grand Fraternity, Butte City Lodge, Eternal Order of Odd Fellows, Rebecca Silver, Star Lodge, Knights of Maccabees, Knights of Pythias, Modern Workmen of the World, Modern Woodmen of the World, United Moderns, and the Masonic Lodge. So a lot of different groups met in this building. Chipman Peterson buildings that were just to the south began construction in 1898, and it was designed by a very well-known architect at the time, James Creighton. And responding to the patriotic fervor of the day, the second floor was built as an armory for Company C of the Arizona National Guard. It also held Thew's New York Cash Store. A post office opened on the second floor there, and by 1927, the second floor had been converted to apartments and then rehabilitated. Stan's Metro Deli was in that building for several years until a grease fire of questionable origin in 1990 actually really totally destroyed both the Chipman and Peterson building, which the Peterson building held the Vienna Bakery that Mr. Bauer opened up. That was just to the south. But both buildings were consumed by fire, and so they had to. The Chipman building had to be completely rebuilt. The only interesting thing that came out of that fire was revealing this sign for Hodnot Hardware store. It was on the north side of the Peterson building, and it then was covered up a couple of years later when the Chipman building was constructed. And I find it interesting that Mr. Hodnot dealt in the typical things of a hardware store of that day: stoves, tinware, etc., furniture, and coffins. You had to do what you had to do during that time to keep in business. The Miller Block in the 1970s, the most famous resident of that part of Mill Avenue was Perry's. Many people remember it. Also, Getz's Boston store. But that was all replaced later. Although it was completed in 1900, the city felt it just wasn't appropriate, and in 1966 demolished the building, and an entirely new set of businesses in new architecture was put there, and this is what obviously the corner looks like today, and Gordon Biersch is now out of business. It's very hard to stay up to date on putting these slides together because there's so much change over time. Laird and Dines, a very important business in our community's history. People gathered at the drugstore, and it certainly wasn't the first drugstore, but it was probably the most famous and lasted for a long time. And it didn't house Laird and Dines until a few years after it was constructed in 1893. Laird and Dines didn't move in until 1914, and it's named for those two gentlemen. Both were community leaders, both served as mayor of Tempe, and were extremely important citizens in our community. In the 20s, there was a tendency to get rid of the Victorian look, so the cupola comes off, and a Spanish revival architecture facade goes on. And of course, that didn't last for long because the city had to widen the streets to accommodate the federal highways. So the west side was demolished, and this large wall panel went up, completely destroying the view and the character of the building. Fortunately, this is one that wasn't lost. It was a part of a project to renovate in 1994. All of the add-ons were stripped off, and the building showed its original formation. A lot of interesting things came out of it. This is the only one in the way of art that I think is safe to show you. On the upper floor were a series of apartments, and you can call them hippies or whatever, students from ASU. There was a lot of decoration on the walls. Unfortunately, we weren't able to save them, but we were able to document them. And actually, they're may not be your form of art, but they really are quite good. The biggest discovery was on the east side in what had become a closet, and I know this is hard to see, but written on the wall in pencil were the names of all of the Rough Riders from Tempe that served under Teddy Roosevelt. 30 names were written on that wall, and they were in what had then become the Tempe American Legion Hall. And we were so excited to see that because it's the first time we got all the names. So working with the contractor, and it was quite a job because it was over brick, it was actually cut out and protected, and it now sits at the museum, and occasionally it goes on display. The restoration that took place restored it much to its original appearance, although on the left-hand side you see new construction that kind of overwhelms the personal character of this early Victorian building. We had a number of theaters in town, and of course we had a very famous individual that became a landmark. He started here in Tempe as a very young man, and that's Red Harkins. And for a while in the 30s, he had at least for one summer, he had a open-air theater. He took over what was called the State Theater, and eventually built his own, the College Theater. And this opened in 1939, and this, he now had what he wanted. He was an incredible individual. He created some things that were not in any other theaters. In the lobby was a fountain that was activated by a photocell. Today, in our pandemic climate, it's ideal because you don't have to touch anything. The lighting inside the theater along the walls were his design. They would fade, they would change colors. Really remarkable. And he also, Dan Harkins, his son, likes to reveal that he was conceived in the apartment in which Red Harkins and his wife lived above the theater. And you can kind of see the window behind the letters of the college theater. Eventually, it became the Valley Art Theater, and really showed some great films. It was not owned by Harkins at that time, but it eventually was acquired by Dan Harkins, who restored it, and it has a good appearance of what it looked like originally. This is interesting. This is the Goodwin building. I think we talked about Garfield Goodwin built it. He opened his Indian store. To the right is a confectionery shop. And they removed the facade because everything underneath the I-beams that kind of hold up the front wall of the building doesn't support anything. So they took it out, put a garage door type mechanism in, and they could roll that up and be open air to the street. Goodwin died in 1944, and a fellow by the name of Miller then purchased the property and continued to operate it until the 1960s. It went through a lot of different iterations on its signage above the entrance, but there you can see it. The inside at that time had wooden floors. Every bit of that building was full of merchandise. In fact, here you see some Indian rugs that are so big they can't fully hang on the wall, so he moved them over and tacked them to the ceiling. May Hurd of the Hurd Museum is said to be one of his early customers, because Garfield Goodwin was able to really get magnificent Indian relics. At that time, laws were different, and so he acquired many, many things, and some of the early collection of May Hurd were from Garfield Goodwin's Indian store. The hardware building, constructed in 1898, one of the tallest three-story buildings. It's not good to measure buildings, these old buildings, by calling them stories, because the ceilings were so high. And these had 16-foot ceilings in them, and this was also built with a ballroom in the back, and this housed a number of lodges and other activities, and of course the hardware store was one of the Curry hardware store had been there for many, many years. There's how the building looked in the 70s. They were kind of tired during that era and needed renovation, and that's how it's been restored. There was a fire in about 77 that nearly destroyed the building. A fellow by the name of Stu Seifer purchased it, was able to get it together and restore it, and so it really looks grand today, very much like it did in its original years. So then there's this building, which went through many iterations, and hopefully you recognize it. It is the Tempe National Bank building, but in the 50s, that whole facade was removed and it was stuccoed over and did not look anything like its original appearance. In fact, it was just pretty much of a box. And again, Stu Seifer came in and did the best he could to restore it, and it has much of its original appearance today. So you see St. Mary's Church in the background, but what really we want to look at is what's here in the foreground. This is Apache Boulevard and Mill Avenue, the intersection looking to the northeast. And do you know what that's the home of? You got to talk louder. I can't hear you. Oh, okay. I think you've got it. Thought I heard somebody say Gamage. So it became Gamage Auditorium. And of course, this is one of the Tempe's most recognizable landmarks in our city. And there's the St. Mary's Church when it was constructed, and this is a view to the kind of northwest Apache Boulevard and the curve, which came in the 1930s. Until then, it was a squared off intersection. You can see how much ASU has grown over the years. Another great landmark that we had, it's gone, is the Wigwam Lodge, which had really a great history. These teepee-looking buildings really attracted tourists, but they never we never had teepees in Arizona. This property was acquired by ASU, and you can see that red arrow to the right. That's where the wigwam was, and as ASU needed more land for construction, they were eventually demolished, much to our chagrin. So that's really just kind of a brief overview. There's so much to Tempe's past. The question that we're all asking is, what will our downtown look like tomorrow? And I don't think any of us have the answer, except to say that we're going to have buildings of greater density, but I think there is enough community support, and that's why we do a presentation like this, so that we remind city leaders that we value our historic properties, and a city needs to have examples of their past. We can't move well into the future without knowing from where we've come. And so efforts are really being made now to save in as much of context as possible of our historic buildings. So that really wraps it up, and I thank the Tempe History Society for giving me the opportunity to kick off this new season. Next month, we will have Mark Vincent, who is a well-known and, was a well-known fixture in our city until he retired. He was the city's architect. He was the first chair of Tempe's Historic Preservation Commission, and he'll be talking about mid-century architecture, which is a whole nother thing that Tempe has a lot of, and I think you'll find that interesting. It'll be at the same place, and we will be doing this virtually. Dan, you can show my handsome face, I guess, again, and that really wraps this up. I hope that in some respects that this, although it doesn't replace being here live, I want to see all of you people here as soon as possible, but I hope you got something out of this way of doing it. We're all learning how Zoom works and Facebook Live works and that sort of thing. So until we meet again next month, thank you so much for viewing today, and we'll see you on the second Wednesday of November. Take good care, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.